Months have passed since I made our last building video about the tiny workshop we made to store our supplies and tools. Since then, we have been super busy with the main show, our future house. I have filmed elements of the build here and there without a clear idea of how I would put together a video with all these clips. My main obstacle to writing a script to string these videos together is that while we are building a house that will have earthen walls, most of what we have done so far isn't that different from a conventional build. The roof is pretty similar to what you find in many buildings here in Argentina, and the foundation is made of cement. Also, I have something else to say before I go on, and that is that I'm not a professional builder, and though my partner Jonah has a lot of experience, he isn't either. We are DIY builders who are learning along the way, so don't think of this as a how-to video at all, but rather the story of how we are building our own two-room house. This story actually starts 2 years ago, when we picked a building site that was sunny but also protected. The only downside of this location is that it had huge boulders everywhere. The house we are building is based on the tiny house design, except that it's not on wheels. We want this home to be firmly planted into the ground. This is the foothills, so that means there are lots and lots of rocks that need to be removed, and the site needed to be level before the building process could begin. This phase was really challenging. We were lucky enough to have the help of a neighbor with a tractor during a couple of days, but most of the time we just used the old technique of burning a fire on the rocks all day, then splashing them with buckets and buckets and buckets of cold water. The drastic change from hot to cold made little cracks in the rock surface, which can then turn into big cracks with the help of a sledgehammer. I have to thank Jona here for doing all of the sledgehammering. The boulders broke up into smaller pieces, which we used to create a rock wall for privacy from the dirt road that's a little bit away. The reason we picked this particular spot for building also highlights the benefits of doing a DIY build. Our land is semi-remote. There's a dirt road on one end, a creek on the other, and forest all around. We are in a rural neighborhood which feels secluded because of the trees that surround it. We didn't want to harm the local landscape, and so we planned a house with a relatively small footprint of 8 by 3.5 meters or 26 by 11.5 feet. Also, we chose a location that receives plenty of sunshine all day, even in winter, so that we don't have to spend so much time or resources heating the house. This spot, which once had so many rocks, didn't have any big trees. Because our crew mostly consists of us two and once in a while one other person, we don't have to clear a big space around the house like conventional builds do, with so many people and big machinery working all at once. All of this means we are able to tuck a house into the forest without having a significant negative impact on the trees and plants around it. And with time, we hope to have a positive impact when we plant more flowers for pollinators once we are in the gardening phase of the project. For now, though, we are very much in the building era, and the next thing we did after removing the biggest boulders was to start to dig out a foundation and removing even more rocks. Next, we started to build the structure with help from a local builder who lives in the area. He helped us place the basic structure of the wood frame as well as the corrugated metal roof. And with time, we added the details like gutters and the remaining wood. I say we, but I really mean he, because Jonah did pretty much all of the woodwork and also installed the wood floor for the storage lofts. While Jonah was working on finishing up the wood frame, the lofts, and starting to add the structure for our future earthen walls, I was busy bringing rocks and sand from the creek for the next phase of the project. While the plan for the floor pretty much followed that of a conventional build, we very much put our own spin on it. We had to dig out any remaining earth so that humidity from the ground can't seep into the house. Then we had to fill in that empty space with rocks, starting with big rocks and slowly working our way down to the smallest of rocks. All of the rocks we sourced from the creek by hand. This might look extremely time-consuming and unnecessary. To gather rocks by hand, then put them in buckets, then into a wheelbarrow, then push them to the site, then unload them and place them in open spaces in the foundation. And for someone with a bigger house, a bigger budget, and less time on their hands, this may not be the best use of time and muscle power. It all goes back to the philosophy of modern natural building, of using the materials that we have in abundance while also accepting that there are a lot of materials that we will have to buy. Humans in the past built homes entirely out of what they had on hand, and each and every culture had their own unique way of doing things based on the local materials available. Today, however, we have access to many more resources, many of which make the build much easier and require less maintenance in the future. While we do have tons of rocks in all sizes, we don't have much by way of lumber and aren't willing to cut down the tallest trees for wood. In the end, we ordered all of the wood we needed, the insulation and metal for the roof, a water tank, cement, and even ended up receiving a truckload of sand to supplement the sand I had gathered myself. Future parts of the build will be almost entirely sourced from our little acre and from the creek. This phase of creating the foundation and floor, however, is almost entirely made of materials that come from somewhere else. And in the case of wood and cement, is sourced in ways that isn't exactly environmentally friendly. That is why we take the time to source the things we can from nearby, even if that means hours or days of hauling rocks and sand. Any rocks or sand we could have ordered both would have come from rivers and creeks somewhere else and require fossil fuels to transport. So any way we can minimize those costs to the environment, we are willing to put in the time and effort to make that happen. Once we had the rock base of the floor to the level we wanted, a big pile of sand, bags of cement, and other tools needed for the floor, we had to decide exactly how we wanted to go about pouring the cement. After weeks of mixing cement in a wheelbarrow for the base of the walls and the back of the kitchen wall, I was really tired of doing everything ourselves and ready to call in some extra help. We debated getting help from someone with a generator and a cement mixer, but in the end called a guy who had helped us before to help mix the cement while Jona made sure everything was level and smooth with the finishing trowel. We also added a bit of pigmentation so that the floor in the future kitchen will be green and the bedroom blue. Now the floor is finished and slowly drying. Each day, one of us stops by to water the floor so that it will dry slowly, which is key to creating a strong surface. The end of this phase synced up with the winter solstice here in South America and some of the coldest days and longest nights of the year. So we're taking a bit of a break after a couple of years of non-stop work. Very soon, we will be back in action with the most exciting phase to date, filling in the wood structure with earthen walls. We will be using a technique called quinsha, and I am planning a video all about that very soon. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, happy crafting!